In the dead of night, a B-25 bomber opens its payload bay doors, over a testing range. But instead of high-explosive iron casings, thousands of screeching, winged mammals spill into the slipstream. By early 1942, the United States was reeling from the devastation of its Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. The military was under immense pressure to mount a response and strike directly at the Japanese homeland. Planners identified a specific vulnerability in Japan's industrial infrastructure. Most urban centers were densely packed and constructed primarily of wood and paper, making them highly susceptible to fire. This era of high-stakes conflict created a vacuum where conventional tactics seemed insufficient. The line between innovative engineering and total absurdity began to thin as the military searched for a breakthrough. This search led to Dr. Lytle S. Adams, an eccentric dental surgeon from Pennsylvania. Despite his personal dislike of bats, labeling them a low form of life, he was fascinated by their biological capabilities. While visiting Carlsbad caverns in New Mexico, Adams watched millions of bats emerge from the darkness. He realized that these animals naturally sought out deep, hidden crevices to roost before dawn. In January 1942, he sent a letter to the White House, outlining a plan to capture these bats and equip them with miniature incendiary devices. He believed they would function as biological guides, carrying fire into the most inaccessible parts of Japanese buildings. The proposal eventually reached President Franklin D. Roosevelt. He famously endorsed the idea in a memo to his advisors, writing that while it sounded like a wild idea, Adams was not a nut. The president then forwarded the proposal to William Donovan, the director of the OSS. Suddenly, a civilian concept was backed by the full weight of the American military intelligence machine. What began as a civilian letter bypassed the standard vetting process and became classified doctrine. In 1942, the drive to find a decisive weapon meant even the most improbable suggestions received serious military funding. The military assembled a task force that included zoologists, field naturalists, and researchers from Harvard. Their objective was to force a living creature to behave like a precision munition. The technical work fell to chemist Louis Fieser, the man responsible for developing military napalm. He was tasked with creating a time-delayed incendiary device small enough for a bat to carry. After testing several species, the team selected the Mexican free-tailed bat. While it weighed only a fraction of an ounce, it was capable of flying with a payload nearly 3 times its own body weight. Capturing the ammunition required raiding caves in Texas. Handlers used large nets on 10-foot poles to catch the animals mid-flight, eventually netting thousands for the experiment. To manage the bats, technicians forced them into artificial hibernation. The animals were placed into ice cube trays and stored in refrigeration trucks to keep them dormant during transport. The delivery system was a sheet metal tube 5 feet long. Inside, 26 circular trays were stacked to hold more than 1,000 hibernating bats in a single bomb casing. The plan called for the carrier to deploy a parachute at 4,000 feet. As it descended, the sides would fall away, releasing the bats to wake up in the warmer air and fly toward their targets. This plan relied on the assumption that nature could be engineered into a compliant machine. The researchers believed they could predict the instincts of thousands of wild animals with total accuracy. In May 1943, the team prepared for a filmed test at the Carlsbad Auxiliary Army Airfield. They planned to use live incendiary devices for the first time. During the preparations, a protocol failure allowed several bats to awaken prematurely. Before they could be loaded into the bomb carrier, the armed animals escaped and took flight. Following their natural instincts, the bats sought out the darkest, most secluded roosts they could find. They disappeared into the eaves of the barracks and beneath the floorboards of the base infrastructure. When the timers reached 0, the airfield ignited. The barracks, hangars, and a general's car were incinerated exactly as designed. The project's secrecy meant that no fire equipment was on standby. Looking over the smoking ruins of the airfield they had just accidentally destroyed, Louis Fieser remarked simply that they had made a little mistake. The disaster at Carlsbad highlighted the inherent unpredictability of biological warfare. When nature is weaponized, the results are rarely confined to the intended target. Despite the destruction of the airfield, the military viewed the incident as a success. The disaster proved that the bats could start intense, untraceable fires in a real-world setting. The project was transferred to the Marine Corps and moved to the WWII Proving Grounds in Utah for more rigorous, controlled testing. At WWII, the military built a replica known as the Japanese Village. It was a culturally accurate reconstruction of urban housing, built with authentic wood and furnishings specifically to test the bats' efficiency. These tests were even more effective. The bats seamlessly infiltrated the mock buildings, where they roosted and burned the entire village to the ground. This chart shows the calculated effectiveness of the weapon. Researchers concluded that, weight for weight, Project X-ray was far more destructive than any conventional firebomb in the U.S. arsenal. The project was no longer a dental surgeon's wild idea. By 1944, the military had developed a fully viable weapon of mass destruction based entirely on the behavior of a cave-dwelling mammal. By the summer of 1944, the program was nearing combat readiness. The logistics for a full-scale deployment over Japan were being finalized. However, Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King abruptly canceled the $2 million program. He had been informed that the project would likely not be ready for combat until mid-1945. The Navy walked away because a faster alternative was nearing completion. The faith and funding of the high command had shifted toward the development of the atomic bomb. Dr. Adams spent his later years arguing that his bat bombs could have ended the war without the level of human loss caused by the nuclear strikes. He believed the destruction of infrastructure alone would have forced a surrender. Instead, the U.S. proceeded with conventional firebombing and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, leaving Japan's cities in total devastation. Project X-ray remains a bizarre footnote of military overreach. It represents a brief moment where the military attempted to harness the instincts of wild animals, only to choose a far more efficient, man-made path of destruction.